Well, the United States, Russia, China, the UK, France, and Germany will all be meeting tomorrow in Frankfurt to discuss the issue of imposing sanctions on Iran if it continues to refuse coming to the table to discuss its nuclear program. Russia, China, and Germany don't want sanctions on a country so critical to the Mideast region's stability. So how does this play out? How does it move forward? Stratfor CEO George Friedman joins us now live from Austin, Texas. Good morning to you, sir. We're seeing reports out today that Iran is presenting updated proposals in regard to resolving the dispute over its nuclear program. Is there a move forward here?
No, the Iranians have done this many times before. They come down to the deadline and then they start appearing to be much more forthcoming, throwing out ideas and proposals. They always back off in the end. On the core issue of stopping the enrichment of uranium, they're going to say no. And they're using a report by the International Atomic Energy Agency to claim that it's going to back their position. So this is posturing on their part.
That report you're citing, Iran did allow the IAEA to visit nuclear facilities last month, but you're saying that's posturing, that's not progress.
Well, the fundamental point is, one, will they stop enrichment? Two, will they come to the table with a long-term plan for ending their nuclear program, the military program? Iran has no incentive to do that. The threats that are coming from the West are hard to believe, and Iran has counters for every one of them. The basic threat of sanctions is that we will sanction Western oil companies that sell gasoline to Iran. That's interesting, but it's not going to be effective unless the Russians and the Chinese are going to join, and they won't. Plus, Iran has the nuclear option, and the nuclear option is not nuclear weapons, but mining the Straits of Hormuz and mining the Persian Gulf.
Realistically, though, how do we impose sanctions in a way that doesn't alienate our own trade relationships? I mean, India conducts a lot of refining of Iranian oil products. There are almost spillback issues here that come towards the U.S. trade as well, and conflicts there.
But for the United States, these are not as important as the fact that Iran might get nuclear weapons. I mean, the question of India being unhappy is certainly something the United States would take into account, but it's not going to supersede the American interest in stopping an Iranian nuclear program. The real problem is China and Russia. They sell gasoline to the Iranians, and the Russians really like the fact that the Iranians are causing so many problems for the Americans. This is their tit for tat for the problems that the U.S. is causing in Georgia and Ukraine.
We've talked so much on this program about that gravity shift towards Asia when it comes to economic power, particularly of China. On the political front, in negotiations like this one that's going to happen tomorrow, how much weight do they carry right now in influencing or using that economic power as a political tool?
Very little. The Chinese are locked into their economic relations. They don't have room for maneuver. They don't have the room to threaten to cut off anything. Ultimately, Iran is not a basic issue for them. The two countries that really matter in this to the United States are Russia and Germany. Germany is dependent on Russia for natural gas exports. They don't want to alienate the Russians. And the Russians are using the Iranian situation as a way to get even with the United States for what they think is aggressive behavior in the former Soviet Union. So this involves a lot of things. But the thing to remember is that September is going to be a crisis month over Iran. It culminates on September 24th when the G8 meets. That's going to be the dominant topic of discussion there, not economic issues. And the U.S. appears to have made promises to Israel that they are going to impose some sort of crippling sanctions on Iran in exchange for Israel not conducting a preemptive strike. So we are in a very dangerous place.
This is going to be an issue we're going to continue to follow in September. As you mentioned, the G20 coming up, the United Nations General Assembly coming up. But before we let you go, I do want to ask you about that news in Saudi Arabia last week, the first attack by al-Qaeda since 2007, first attack against a Saudi royal. What's happening?
A very strange attack. Well, what's happening is that you've had a merger of al-Qaeda in Yemen and Saudi Arabia. And the Yemenis are in much better shape than the Saudis are. They've been cut down. This attack came from Yemen. Somehow, this guy was allowed on board the aircraft carrying the deputy minister, Naif, and he apparently hid the bomb, by all reports, inside of his body. I'll let you imagine what that looked like. It's a very strange story from beginning to end, and we suspect there's more to it than that because we don't understand how they penetrated his security.
And got just incredibly close to a member of the royal family. Thank you so much for that update, Stratfor CEO George Friedman. Obviously, that news in Saudi Arabia, that news out of Iran continue to be tracked on this program, and any impact on the oil markets as well.